Welcome, everybody. So I know we've got quite a fair few people who've joined us today and a fantastic panel. So really welcome to another Legal Tech Talks. So my name's Frances Anderson. I'm the MD of NetLaw Media. Now, today, I'm actually delighted to introduce a truly topical session where this roundtable is going to look at diversity, leadership and talent in legal tech and the security community. Now, during this debate, which is going to be led by David Foszaki, we're going to explore the progress made, the employment barriers that remain within legal tech and the security sector, whilst addressing the technological changes afoot within law firms right now, and what the impact of the controversial vaccine passport can be and will be. Now, in addition, we're also going to address the technological changes, as I said, afoot within firms right now and explore how is this going to impact our future talent, which is coming in. And we can't really look back, but forwards. So now, before I go through the housekeeping, let me start by introducing our chair, David Foszaki, who many of you will know, and for those who don't, David's been in the legal IT for 15 years and was a previous CIO at MW Solicitors, during which time he demonstrated his proficiency in driving business transformation, delivering business revenue growth and new client services, reducing operating costs, driving profitability, and facilitating rapid growth. Now, he's currently joined CTS in July 2020 as the company's first in-house legal chief information officer. Now, he is responsible in furthering, driving the alignment for their services, offerings and unique needs for the legal sector, I should say, mouthful, sorry, David, and in helping to deliver a superior client experience to CTS's many law firm clients. Now, before I hand over to our chair, as we are live, I encourage all of you who are listening to ask questions. You can join us live, and it would be great to hear your voice and your opinions on this, because some of the issues we're bringing forwards are quite controversial. Some of them will hit home for many of us. And we've also got a Q&A function. So if you don't want to do that, please put your question through there or through chat. We will be keeping an eye on it and obviously bring you in as and when, and also bring your questions in as well. So without further ado, David, it's over to you, and welcome everyone.
Well, Frances, thank you very much. And I must rewrite that introduction for you with less tongue twisters. That's my responsibility, my bag, everybody. I'm sorry about that. Hello and welcome, everyone. It's nice of you to join us. And we're looking forward to getting into this topic, which in some of our earlier private conversations together, planning for this, started as diversity in legal tech. But as you'll see in a few moments, it has expanded somewhat because of some of the challenges we see today, especially after 12 months of practical lockdown. And we're going to get into that. Let's look at some of the overarching themes that we're going to try and explore together. Diversity in the workplace is an ever-present issue and has been for a number of years. Has it taken a few steps backwards in the last 12 months? We're going to explore that. We're going to look at recruiting from pools of talent and whether that pool of talent is actually going the wrong way and getting smaller. We're going to expand on that. Have things got worse because of the COVID lockdowns? And in many respects, have we actually taken backward steps and not as progressed as perhaps we were before all of this happened? There is actually some evidence, we're going to explore that, for mothers at home shouldering the burden of childcare, and perhaps women's inequality in the workplace has been set back because of that. We're going to explore that. So we're not picking up where we left off. In fact, perhaps there's a challenge to all of us that we need to redouble our efforts. We're going to get into the hot topic of the vaccination program and vaccine passports. There are all sorts of ethical implications for vaccine passports, but considering that the BAME communities at the moment are a little behind on the vaccination programs compared to other communities here, what does that do for inequality in the workplace if suddenly passports become a route back into the office and a route into other things, as we will explore? There's the issue for our young people we dealt specifically, which is linked to diversity in net law media, and the work we do here was very much working with schools and with children 16, 17, 18-year-olds. We were doing work placement programs. We're not doing any of that anymore. So we're going to explore those issues, as well as looking at things like trolling and online abuse, which is increasing for young people as we've become more virtual. As you can see, we've only got an hour and there's so much to potentially talk about. Before I introduce my stellar guests, all-star panel today, I just want to reiterate what Francis has said, okay? Which is, and I can see some comments coming in already, which is absolutely fantastic. Please keep that up. Don't wait for Q&A at the end, okay? The Q&A is all the way through. These sessions work best when we're having a dialogue with all the people who are sort of dialed in. Now, you may want to pose a question. You can use the Q&A function and we will try and get those through, or you can use the chat function and we will get that. But the Q&A is a little easier to keep track of the comments as they come in. You might not just have a question, you might just want to express an opinion on something that has been said. Feel free to express that opinion or to make that comment or indeed pose a question, and we'll bring them in as we go. So hopefully you'll find today stimulating. So who have we got to fire up the synapses and stimulators as we go? I'm going to ask them to wave at the camera as I give them a small introduction, but we have Yoza Hamza. Hello, Yoza, who's the director and legal counsel for Middle East for Gartner. So we're going to have some real facts and figures, people, some real evidence. And Yoza has that at her fingertips. The CEO of Nakoda, which is Shilpa Bandakar. Hello, Shilpa.
Hello.
And we have the Chief People Officer at Slater and Gordon. Welcome, Alicia Alinia. Nice to see you. And finally, but by no means least, in any way, Mabel, keep your daggers there. We have the IT Director at Field Fisher, Mabel Harvey, everybody. Okay,
Hi.
So troops, are we ready to go?
Yeah.
So we're gonna make a start. He says, scrolling back through his questions, let's talk about diversity talent pools at the moment in today's market. Are we going forwards? Are we going backwards? Is it getting easier? Is it getting harder? Shilpa, I'll come to you first and I'll say, is it getting harder, do you think, to recruit more diverse candidates? What is the view of recruiters and what are you witnessing?
So just to give a little bit of background, I guess, on what, I'm assuming why you're asking me the question.
Yeah.
So Nakoda is a startup, and we've actually been recruiting quite a bit over the last 12 months for different roles, junior legal engineers, all the way through to a lead architect and some senior front-end developers as well. And I am struggling to find diverse talent, and I have now, whether it's internally, whether it's in the market, whether it's what recruiters are presenting to me as their first slate of potential candidates, even when I push back and say, come on, we can do better than this, there may be more people, it seems, and this is anecdotal because I'm giving you my personal experience, but it seems like it's getting harder and harder. And the more senior the role, the less diverse talent I seem to be presented. Even as the first slate of sort of CVs to look at, which, I mean, it's disappointing and it's also worrying, right? Because it was never a big pool to begin with. So if it's reducing, I don't know when we get out of lockdown how small that's going to be.
And Shilpa, what do you think are some of the underpinning bits to why it might be shrinking, or what you're seeing as the shrinking pool?
Again, I'm going to give you, from my talking to, I guess, friends who are from the BAME community across in lockdown. I think there's fewer of them, but I think there's also a hesitance in making a jump right now when you potentially have either caring responsibilities, you're in the middle of lockdown, you want some job security. There's, I think, extra pressure on what onboarding and joining a new company and the expectations when you're a new joiner are to go up the curve. All of that together, when I think the talent pool is already quite small, I think makes that ability for someone to go, actually, I can do this and take that leap that much harder. So I think it's a combination. I think it's a smaller pool, getting smaller. And I suspect a lot of the candidates in there don't think this is the best time to be stretching or reaching out for something new.
Shilpa, if we go before COVID, go back 14 months, I'm interested in, and I'll bring the other panelists in on this as well. Was it getting easier or better at that point? In other words, was the trend in a positive direction of more diverse candidates coming through, but it's been halted by COVID or reversed by COVID? Or was it already not a great pattern which has been accelerated by COVID, in your opinion?
So it feels like we were on the right track before COVID. So it wasn't a big talent pool, but it was growing. It felt like it was going in the right direction. We were having more conversations, even with recruiters. They weren't pushing back as much, saying, well, there isn't anyone out there. It was, go do your homework and please come back with a better list. I was seeing also more, even in, whether it's, on LinkedIn, you were seeing interesting people making interesting career moves. You were seeing a lot more diverse talent and quite senior people as well in these roles. I feel like I'm seeing less of it now.
I'm going to bring in Alicia and Mabel. Yeah, I'm going to bring in Alicia and Mabel at this point from the law firm point of view and recruitment. And there's the difference here. I know, Alicia, you're responsible for people across the group, and Mabel, obviously, you've got a technology focus. But I'll come to you first, Alicia. What are you witnessing that what Shilpa is witnessing is in a more limited pool of availability of diverse resource?
Well, our experience is probably slightly different because we're an established organisation. We're not in a startup position. So having that diversity, we probably had the platform to be able to identify the people that we needed. But even prior to COVID, we made the conscious decision as part of the business strategy that we were going to move into a legal tech type of organisation. So that traditional model of a law firm was something that we were moving away from as a business.
Right.
And when it came to the way in which we recruited people, actually one of the things that we thought was one of the biggest opportunities around COVID was the home working environment, because we very quickly moved people into a virtual working environment. And over the last 12 months, we've onboarded 500 new employees. And that's a huge amount of people on board in a virtual environment who've never, ever met any of their new colleagues. And so part of that has been that we've been able to capture talent irrespective of location. And it's increased our diversity pool to the benefit of the organisation, because we know that the largest percentage of those leaving university and doing law degrees are now women. Whereas that stuffy environment of what people perceive the law to be is that it's a very middle class, white type of environment, and actually breaking those down those barriers where you present yourself as not a traditional traditional business is working to the advantage of the recruitment plans. Now, absolutely, as Shilpa says, people are hunkering down because they were very concerned about what the future held. But what we're now seeing is people are making the active decision to move because they want a change.
Right.
And that's the impact that I think we're going to have over the next few weeks and months, where people are looking at different opportunities.
Alicia, I am curious, because I know Stacey and Gordon have been making some changes for a while. Are you doing these things in response as part of your COVID response, or actually were these things that you wanted to do or had started to do anything, and actually as a result of COVID, you've perhaps been able to accelerate them a bit further than you originally planned?
It's exactly that, David. It's been an acceleration of a strategy that we always had in mind. So we wanted to move to a world where flexible working wasn't a form-filling policy, but it was just part of the culture that we built in the organisation. And what we've had over the last 12 months is the ability to just transform that as quickly as possible. So if I give you an example, in terms of the digital revolution that this business has gone through, precipitated by the COVID lockdown environment, where we digitized all of our files, 40,000 files across the business, documents across the business in such quick time. What that means is that when you onboard a lawyer or any other part of the shared services business, they're set up immediately to work from home. Now, I know for mothers working, and I'm one of them, This is a bit of a false environment because you've got kids crawling all over you and bring on 8th of March. But but once we're out of this environment, we're all set up to work from home, which allows us to be both mothers and career women and all of those things. So for us, it's a brighter future for the type of people that we have, because it gives flexibility as a culture, as opposed to a policy that fill in.
Alicia, we're gonna come to the issue of mothers at home just in a minute and explore that a bit further. But just generally, and thinking about female candidates in the workplace, and it's always been an issue for those in technology departments to find women candidates who are actually in the market. And maybe I'll come to you on this because, you know, when Deltas was created a number of years ago, we were tackling this, had nothing to do with COVID, and I'm just wondering whether, you know, certainly a lot of our programs at Deltas were impacted and put on hold. It can hardly be helping the situation, Mabel.
No, I'm inclined to agree, and it's great to hear Alicia's positive story there, because I think from my perspective, across the board, across the firm, recruitment has continued, and I think there's been a huge focus on the legal side. So the trainees coming in, the associates coming in, actually diversity's got to be a big part of that recruitment. I think on the business service side, if I just filter it down to tech, we are still struggling to find the right candidates. You know, we've put a recruitment out recently, and I had to say to my manager who's looking for the recruit and also to recruit, this is what I want you to focus on. I had to remind them that that was the thing, because that isn't natural to them. And I think also they'll go to recruiters, or they'll use they use their own platforms to do recruitment, but they focus on the skills, not the individuals. And I also think there is still an issue, and maybe it's not for everybody, that maybe the terminology that we're using in the job descriptions aren't necessarily attracting the right sort of people to the role. It's sometimes written by male, and it's not actually written in such a way that it would bring people in. I think the digital transformation piece, people working flexibly, we've always offered that, and maybe we don't shout enough about it if that's what people want. But I do still think there's a gap there, and I would like to see that change, as we all would.
Mabel, you've just touched on, so I've got so many things firing in my brain, what you've just said about bias, actually, that comes in. We're going to talk a little later maybe about the bias in AI programming and how that affects diversity, but actually the bias in writing job descriptions. If you are mainly men in the IT departments and in tech divisions in firms, especially law firms, then that bias is going to come into the writing of the roles, isn't it? And I have to say, until you said that, Mabel, that hadn't occurred to me before, as someone who probably has written most of the job descriptions. And I'm now thinking to myself, well, maybe I shouldn't write them for that reason. I can't help my own bias, but I can do something about encouraging the women in the team to help with that by writing fresh. Shilpa, I'm going to come back to you, then I'm going to bring Yozza in. But on this issue with recruiters, perhaps giving the answer that we've heard so many times, there just aren't any female candidates out there. I'm wondering whether we should accept that excuse anymore. I mean, should the recruiters be working harder at this? What's their role in actually just not accepting that and trying to do something about it? Can they do something about it, Shilpa?
I think I most definitely think they can. As much as I think it isn't the biggest pool, and maybe some don't want to make the move, they are there. And as far as I'm concerned, it's the recruiter's role to help me get the right candidate. So it's their role to go convince these individuals that this is the right role for them, and to tell me what I need to do to convince them that this is the right role for them. So I think there is a huge part for recruiters to play. And actually what Mabel said, I've scribbled it down, because I actually now want to go back and reread my job descriptions. But again, I think recruiters have a role to play and say, I don't think this is going to be attractive to the talent pool that you're looking at. Would you consider doing it, in a different way? That's the value add I think that recruiters need to bring. And I'm also actually, am I allowed to ask a question, David? But just add, I'm curious.
Go on, Shilpa, far away, that's fine.
No, I'm curious to know from Alicia and Mabel's experience, because I'm definitely I'm finding it harder to recruit more senior talent. I'm not finding it as hard to recruit junior talent. And I want to see more senior women in technology. And I mean, Nakoda is Linklater's back, so I have access in that sense to all the recruiters Linklaters has access to. I have that brand. But it's just, I am still struggling to find like a lead architect that is female or comes from, an ethnically diverse background or anything that's not the very traditional, I don't know, white male developer. I've said they can work from anywhere. Like I feel like I've done all of the things I would think would make it more interesting and attractive. And I still had very, very few options presented to me.
Well, Mabel and Alicia, go on.
Can I just answer the question? Can I just say something there on that? I mean, it's going to be a weird one because I've worked in legal all my life, but are they attracted to tech companies and not to legal? It's just out there. Do they want to go and work for the Googles and all these, the banks and all these fancy companies that that touch their lives every day rather than go and work for a professional services organisation? Are we not making ourselves as attractive as perhaps we could? And also, I've been in legal for a long time, as some of my counterparts, and I do think that there wasn't a succession structure in place that people could learn the job and grow their way through the organisation or grow their way through the roles. There's a lot of people in my firm, in my team rather, who've been with me for a very long time, and most of those are male. I think the female who's been with me the longest has been 10 years, and she's amazing. I do find that if I want a project manager or a trainer, the list of diverse candidates is much bigger than if I'm looking for someone on the service desk or in my development team. So that's just from my experience.
Now, I'm going to, Yozo, don't worry, Yozo, I'm definitely coming to you, but I do want to bring a question in from one of our guests today, who's certainly a member of Deltas as well, Christian Toon, who has a couple of good questions. So I'll pose them both to you, okay? So what tips can you offer, or can you offer to Christian for those wanting to recruit an ideal candidate? So I suppose that's about, how do you do that? How do you make yourself attractive? And in the panel's experience, what are the three things that people want? Is it just pay and reward, bonuses, etc.? Or do people want more or different things offered in their terms to be more attractive to the diversity of the BAME communities or to more women? What's your thoughts on that? And Yozo, maybe I'll start with yourself and then come to the others.
Well, in my experience, when you're talking about the top three things, I would say it's never only the pay and the money when it comes to diverse candidates, because they want to feel belong, they want to feel included, they want to see their career being, they want to see career progress. So most of the time when I'm, talking to a candidate that is from a diverse background, they want to see what's the policies of the company, in promotion, in progress, what's my career in 5 years' time? They want to see the policies of flexible working, do you support that or not? What happens if? So it's not always the pay that comes to their priority. They're looking for a lot of things just beyond the pay, in my opinion, especially in the younger generation and the millennials. They want to see someone also that, invests in them. And in my opinion, they want to see a leader who leads in diversity. They just don't want a company that adopts diversity. They want you as a manager to lead them through the process, not just, a company that puts a policy on the paper and that's it. And where comes our roles as managers to sponsor those candidates if you recruit someone, to bring them on the table in their future role, and again, career progress.
Alicia, you've just said that you've just recruited 500 people in the last sort of period. So I'm obviously going to say, when it comes to attracting diversity within the talent pool, what was your recent and hopefully successful approach?
Well, we carried out a survey, I think it was about 12 to 16 months ago, where we wanted the business to tell us what it was that kept them in the business. And in fact, pay and rations was number 4 in the top 4. And the first was culture and purpose. Now, everybody knows that S&G has been through its own challenges. But the one thing that keeps the business together is its culture. So it's the culture where law makes you intrinsically motivated to do a service for a client, and that the outcome is rewarding because you do it to the best of your abilities. Now, couple that with the ability to have technology that allows you to have the best possible service you can for your client and your customer, it makes the proposition so much more attractive. We know that legal tech companies are the fastest growing industries within the legal profession. And let's face it, traditional law hasn't done a great job over many years in terms of diversity, because it has this very stilted structure that makes it really difficult for people to move up and down. Now, take away those barriers of partnership, having 250 people have to agree any change within an organization at any one time, and you've got the ability to make change quickly and rapidly. Now, I'm not suggesting for a second that at those top levels, we've quite got it right in terms of representation, but I can see the funnel now being opened up to providing greater opportunity to just start smashing those glass ceilings in an organization like ours. And I think that that's got to be the motivation.
So doing different, being different, cultural values are key to make oneself attractive as a place of work. And you would definitely feel that that's
absolutely.
That is key. I think that was going to Christian's point, actually. It's not all about the money and the benefits, is it? There must be other things. And it's interesting, Alicia, to hear you talk about the intrinsic things within some structures of some law firms. You know, I've recently gone from a law firm into a legal tech firm, and we do have more women. I note, though, that they're in roles like project managers, account management, client success management, elements of service leadership, but not always in the engineering roles, whether that be first, second line, or the engineering build, or the cloud specialists, or the note on developers. I think Richard has just made a comment to us saying he agrees with Mabel. He's in Bristol, there's a huge startup here, and working with law firms as they do, they struggle to convince developers to join a law firm. So, you know, maybe we can look to your example there, Alicia. I'm going to move things on just a little bit, if you don't mind, because I knew this would happen, that time would go on and we're only touching the first topics. But I do want to talk about the COVID period and what it has done for equality, specifically with regards to opportunities, or even more equal opportunities for women in the workplace. And in my opening monologue, I talked about the fact that whether we like it or not, there seems to now be some evidence, we'll talk about that looking after children in the home has fallen more to the mothers than the fathers, and that is having an impact on their own well-being and their own ability to continue to do their jobs, creating pressures which would remain if we didn't all go back into the offices. And maybe I'm curious here that as we move into this future period where you can be in the office, you can be at home, certainly for those firms encouraging more home working, what do we need to look out for specifically in this area? Now, Yoza, I'll come to you first. Certainly from a Gartner point of view, I'm curious as to whether you're seeing some evidence already. I know it's only been a year, but is there empirical evidence or anything else to suggest that mothers are taking an unfair burden when it comes to this and affecting their work life?
Now, to be honest, if you're talking in terms of metrics and, you know, numbers, last year was probably the lowest level in 30 years where women have, you know, been out of the workforce. You know, 8 out of 10 of job losses affected by men, female workers have borne that kind of loss. One, they're trying to juggle between work and family. At some point, you know, interviewing women, 1 out of the 4 women are either considering downsizing their job or considering to take it part-time, or even leaving their job to ensure that they can.
Oh, we seem to have lost Yoza at that point. I think everyone else is still moving, so I'm assuming you're still with me. So actually, Shilpa, I'll come to you just to pick up the mantle from that point. I think I'm right in saying, because I asked a question before, that you're all mothers on this panel. Shilpa, what do you think is the reality here? Are women being, have we set women back?
Yeah, my line on, you know, if you're talking 19% of the board seats on companies listed on stock exchange are also women only. 4.5% are, you know, gender racial racial or diverse candidates. 4.5, that's ridiculous if we're in the 21st century and we're talking about that percentage. The funny thing is that, only 72 women out of the 100% hired are only being promoted versus 100 men. Again, that's a ridiculous percentage compared to the fact that the graduates are higher in terms of law. But, when it comes to promotions, comes to workforce, that's not representing the same as the higher, the graduates coming out of law school.
Shilpa, I'll come to you now on that.
Yeah, I guess, so in complete agreement, we've chatted about this before. I think it definitely again feels like women have taken, moms especially have taken a greater hit on their careers over this time. It is physically impossible to do your job and care for children at home, right? I mean, they're meant to be out at school. There's not enough hours in the day to do all of it. If you are, which a lot of us are still expected to do, you're obviously sleeping a lot less. So there's a toll that is taken. So, you're sort of saying like people are choosing to work part-time, people are choosing to scale back. To me, that's not just the starting point when we come out of this. It's what other, it's the exhaustion, it's the lack of confidence, you spent a year kind of not putting yourself on video, right? Because you're running around to get breakfast and then you're coming to the screen, so you're not on video, you're on mute a lot. Now think about what that does to your colleagues' perceptions of you, or your perception of your colleagues' perception of you. So I do think we need to actually do a lot more to get back to where we were. We're going to have to put effort just to get back to where we were and then start again. And I think in a world where we will, I think, do more remote working, I think managers will have to be quite cognizant of the fact that you need to bring people into conversations, make them visible, even if they're not on video, encourage that voice to come back when we're all able to sort of give 100% again, when we have the energy to.
I'll just point out, the fallout of it's just not threatening the current pool, but it's also threatening the future pool of candidates and next generation coming into as females. I mean, if we're having lower percentages now, what do we expect out of the next generation who's, pipeline coming out of university as well?
And I'm interested in, Shilpa, you mentioned there again against a bias, maybe a bias against mothers because they are struggling at home. They're not visible. They are video off and audio on, or sometimes audio off and coming in and out, and whether that is leading to biases and perceptions in others. I'm curious about this topic in many ways, mainly because I actually think the home is a very unequal place. I'm interested in your view on this, Alicia, because the home office environment is not equal. In an office, it is, because you try and create an equal leveling experience in the office where everyone has access to the same sort of facilities and opportunities that comes from it. But certainly younger people, especially who are still living with mum and dad or still in flat shares and house shares, their home office environments are not exactly conducive to the best work. And then for mothers and fathers, I'm going to bring in a question here from someone, and I think this is very interesting. I'm just going to read it out to you, but I'm a big fan of diversity and equal rights and opportunities for women at the workplace. When it comes to diversity, more often than not, the general assumption is that we are talking about women, and that's irrespective of race. In this generic definition, I sometimes find BAME men missing out on opportunities. How do we address this? Alicia, I'm going to come to you first on that.
Well, I think it's a really important point, because when we think about minority groups, so I'm always a real believer in people are only marginalized when you don't reach out to them. So there is this perception when it comes to law that it's an open forum where people can kind of join whenever they want. What's happened in this COVID period is that those people who don't have the privilege of wider networks haven't been able to access those areas. So usually the people who have the greatest chance of coming into this profession are those who have parents, families who can put in a word. It's that kind of network of who you know to be able to get your foot in the door. Now, when it comes to the BAME communities, that's always been a challenge in the legal profession. And I absolutely take Shilpa's point around women and the impact that that's had over the period. But it's not just a COVID impact, is it? It's always a marginalised group, which are BAME women getting access to the higher echelons of board level, executive level in any organisation. That's always been a problem that we haven't really faced into. And I take on point the question that's just been raised, which is BAME men don't have representation across, as managing directors and partners and executive board levels. In fact, I read a recent stat that said currently in the FTSE 100, we do not have one BAME person in the board at board level. That's a horrific stat to have in this day and age, when we've made such a big thing about having, BAME and Black Lives Matters and everything. But what have we actually done to change that perception that these professions aren't just for a certain demographic or a certain gender?
Yoza, are you seeing evidence from a Gartner point of view of those trends and patterns reflective in some of the questions that we're seeing here?
Yes, there are, but there's not enough metrics yet that has been published in that area.
Right. And I've got in our earlier chats, Alicia, you mentioned something around white privilege, and I'm interested in your thoughts on that, because you think we should maybe change the narrative a little there.
I do. I kind of recoil at the thought of white privilege. White being the operative word, because talk to kids in Moss Side and in Manchester and some of the most deprived areas around our country, and they won't recognise what white privilege is. I think it's privilege, and it just so happens that when you look at the various boards and societies in this country, they happen to be of a Caucasian variety. I think it's about networks. I think it's about who you can access, who can give you the opportunities to get the leg up. Now, I know that for anything that you read, when it comes to people within the academic profession, you do not have representation at that top level. Similarly, with the legal profession, this isn't just something that impacts tech or legal, it's at every stage. So in my mind, it's a systemic problem that we have in terms of representation across the board. And until we kind of shut down those barriers and kind of remove ourselves from having this old boys network that only really speaks to who you know, at what point in your life you've been able to reach a certain place, and then it becomes about maintaining a position at all costs and not having any regard to who's coming up behind you, and pulling those people up to that level, and having succession planning as a must in organizations that don't just reflect what you look like, but from a diverse pool. That is never going to change.
Now, again, time skipping on, and I definitely want us to talk about vaccine passports and what that and the ethics and the policy around that and the potential impact. Before we do, we've got 3 questions in from our guests, our audience, and there's linked themes. So I'm going to ask them all and then just bring it over to you. And Mabel, I'll probably come to you first. But so we have a question. These questions are: how might we design futures that will continuously give diverse users a safe space beyond the pandemic? Are we really designing solutions that are user friendly? Where should we start? And a sort of link on that from Craig Wakeford. I would be interested in the panel's view on how tech can assist diversity, and in particular those with disabilities. So using tech, the user friendliness of it, how we can design those safe spaces with it, and assisting those with disabilities. Thoughts on that, Mabel? And these are fresh questions, so I know this is just off the top of people's
yeah. Okay, so I think one thing that, the last how many years, 20 years, but more so in the last 2 years, everyone has recognised is that technology is at the heart of everything we do. And it's not only for legal, it's all organisations, whether it's manufacturing and automation, and even for the schools now. There's plenty of children here, plenty of people here with young families, and and the stories that I was hearing from schools that we support through our workplace around the children being sent home, having to homeschool and not having access to a computer, and then you gave them the computer, they didn't actually have access to the internet. So I think it touches everywhere, and I do feel that we should be, as a nation, we should be better placed to put technology first rather than putting some of the political situations first. And I do think that in terms of designing solutions, everybody, someone asked about people with disabilities, everybody has to use this stuff. So maybe the wrong people are designing the solutions, or maybe we're not reaching out to the right audience to ask what do they want. And I know that's quite a big question, depending on the solution that you're designing, but there's got to be a lot more done around that.
Shilpa.
But this is why this conversation is so important, right? And what Alicia said before, any diversity helps with designing better solutions. If any marginalized community is part of the team that is designing a solution, I think they will think differently from the more privileged groups that think only in the way that they've been taught and in to reflect the life experience they've had, right? So you can't ever design for every single use case, but the more diverse the team that's designing, the more likely that the solution will be fit for purpose for a wider range of people. And I think that's why it's so important, whether it's BAME candidates, whether it's women, whatever it is, like you just need different ways of thinking and experiences brought to that table.
You can't have innovation without diversity. You can't expect, innovation and creativity and different solutions while you're having the same kind of mindsets on the same table every time.
Because you end up going down a particular path that becomes less innovative through time because there's not the right level of challenge, and that challenge comes from diverse opinion. Is that your thoughts on that, Yosla?
Yeah.
What jumps into my mind on that. So let's now get into vaccine passports. The vaccination program, we're more than 20 million vaccinated, and certainly by mid-April, I think people over their 50s will be done, and into May, people over their 40s will be done. It's really beginning to happen. But with that now comes the suggested or floated idea by the government of having a qualified certificate, if you like, a vaccine certificate as a form of passport. I think originally it was thought of as a way to be able to travel and move about, and maybe for international travel, but perhaps there's wider ramifications of this policy. What if companies, for example, say, well, actually, we want to allow people back into our office spaces, we want to see the vaccine passport. Why? Because people are nervous of coming back into the office, and perhaps they will feel better if they know that everybody's got the vaccine passport. It's not us saying you must do this. We're looking after the people the majority of people who are saying, let's have the vaccine passports. Certainly for our work with Deltas and going into schools, should 16 or 17-year-olds only do work placements in workplaces at work where they maybe had the vaccine, or where everybody in that workplace has had the vaccine? Is that one way to let them in, or is that restrictive as well? I'm curious as to your thoughts onto these things. I'll finish with this point that the BAME communities at the moment are behind on the trends for vaccination. Lots of publicity going on at the moment to try and improve that. I actually live with a Sri Lankan doctor, and she here in West London has been telling me about the difficulties she's having. She's delivering the vaccine, and she sees this problem amongst her own community, Sri Lankan community, as well, actually, as those around here in West London. It is a problem. If you need, therefore, a passport in order to get access to services or go back into place of work, are we going to increase the problems and the disadvantages and the inequality for diverse communities? Now I've said all of that, please discuss and challenge or push back. Mabel, why don't you kick it off on this?
Do you know what, David? This is an ethical minefield. Right. I mean, vaccine passports have got the potential to be extremely discriminatory. We've got enough of that already, let alone to bring another level in. And also there's sort of some invasion on people's personal privacy. I mean, reportedly there's a larger proportion of the BAME community not taking the vaccine, but It's not mandatory. People have choices. We see this as a way out of the current difficult situation that we have. They have a choice. And also there's a lot of people out there who have legitimate health reasons why they can't have the have the vaccine.
Yes.
So, it's just a minefield, absolute minefield.
I always think about it from a legal perspective, because there's a lot of aspects of, when we're as a company, we're considering something like that. You have to think like, the associates in the office, are they comfortable to be around people who are not vaccinated? And then you have to think about it from the other perspective. What about the freedom of choice? What about people who are thinking not to be vaccinated? And then thinking about, if they're staying, because I live in a country such as Dubai, where people are normally and many times are not staying with their families, staying with friends. So he could be vaccinated, and then he's having a lot of friends around who they're not vaccinated. Then thinking about, from the serving their clients, especially as consultants, you're going to clients all the time. What if their clients are mandating that they get vaccinated, but they don't want to? Is this a breach of employment? There's a lot of controversial questions that are coming into this, and how it's being implemented, what's going to be the best practice. I think there's no right answer at the moment to that part.
There is a thought, isn't there, that the government actually used it as a tactic to drive up those saying yes to the vaccine.
Oh, yeah.
My housemate, who's a doctor, did actually say that it was the thought of not being able to go on holiday and not having a vaccine passport, that they did begin to see patterns of increased uptake in people coming in for the vaccine. So I'm wondering how much of it is a ploy. But I'm also concerned that it's not just about government policy, that companies, organizations might take it on themselves, maybe through the peer pressure or pressure from their members or their staff. They may feel compelled to invent policy in this area. Is that dangerous? Alicia, I'm going to come to you on that. Well, what are your policies, Alicia? What have you said for Slater and Gordon? Reveal all.
Well, we're in the process of creating our roadmap out of COVID, which is very, very exciting. But as everyone knows on this panel, it is like a Pandora's box. How do you cater to the fact that there is no employment precedent whatsoever on what this means and how you navigate around it? On the other hand, if I dust off my political philosophy days of Jeremy Bentham's greatest good for the greatest number, what can we do to protect the largest proportion of the population from what has been a debilitating pandemic for so many of us for the last 12 months? And that's a really fine balance for anybody to try and navigate through. And I'm sure at some point we'll find that balance, but at the moment it's very, very difficult to judge. We don't want to force anybody to give up their own rights to individual choice, but it's got to be against the backdrop of what that choice means for the majority of the population. And that includes companies and organizations.
We've got a couple of comments from Tony Barrett. Thank you, Tony. I'll just read them out and we'll throw them into our discussion. Some can't have the vaccine due to age. Younger, pregnant staff could be excluded. And any policy must be open and clear. Some companies have already said non-vaccinated staff visits to clients' home, or maybe restricted non-vaccinated staff visits to client homes. And it is this part that I'm interested in. I think there's a bit of human nature, isn't there, where those that have had the vaccine will go, yeah, I'll have the certificate. Yeah, I'll have that because I want my access back. I want my normality back. And that's going to be a very powerful driving force. And I'm just wondering whether we'll get to a point when the vaccination program is over and maybe 85% have been vaccinated and 15%. I'm more concerned about what we end up with for that 15%. Shilpa.
The challenge with that 15% is they become invisible again, right? Like we've talked about this. If you're not allowed to go to a client's home or be on a client project without the vaccine, what does that do to the careers of the people who haven't either chosen not to have the vaccine or cannot have the vaccine? I mean, we have to respect both, but what is it going to do to their professional options, to their career growth, to their opportunities? And if you're seeing patterns in certain communities, and I mean, not difficult to see where that's going to take us, right?
Absolutely. Now we've got a few minutes left. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to come to one last topic, which is to really think about younger people and what it means for people coming through into careers and people in school and education. Certainly those that we want to think about STEM subjects and getting in. What's COVID done, and what is the new reality of this hybrid future world? Vaccinated, not vaccinated, it all sort of wraps into one. And it has had an impact on the access of young people to life opportunities, experiences. Those things have taken a hold and been on freeze for the last 12 months. And my concern is they're going to continue to be. So if we think, Mabel, very much on deltas and what we were doing beforehand, which was going into schools, talking about STEM subjects, inspiring them about IT in legal spaces and others, and then doing work programs and work placement programs. They've been on hold for a while. Maybe what do you think the harm is the harm reversible? And also, are there different ways of skinning the cat to do what we need to do? Don't want to skin cats, by the way, anybody. Terrible choice of words. I love cats. Okay, Mabel.
The worrying thing for me is it took us a good 18 months to 2 years to actually get our program up and running and to kind of get into the schools and actually demonstrate what we could offer to those children. And so losing 2 years effectively of that, we got to kind of start again. The priorities for the schools aren't going to be us coming to talk to their kids because they're still playing catch up. You know, the people who haven't taken their GCSEs and those who've missed part of their program. So I think we do have to work harder. I wonder whether there's an opportunity to rethink how we deliver our programs, but seeing the children face to face actually enables engagement. And we've known that, we've seen some of our fantastic work where we've actually introduced some of these youngsters in and they've gone on to actually get jobs and get internships and apprenticeships. We really need to rethink that. I think there is a social media aspect here because I've been watching social media for the certain communities and see that actually they are reaching out to them through the platforms that they're familiar with. And maybe there's something we can do around that, but we do need to rethink it.
Before I move on, I'm saying to our audience, it's the last opportunity to ask some questions whilst we've got a few minutes. If there's something that you've got that you want to present to the panel, now's the time to throw it into the Q&A and I will bring it there. Mabel, you've just touched on a few things there about, you know, people have been missing GCSEs or the scores last year were judged with algorithms that didn't quite work and all the rest of it. And they're taking a different approach this year. But it's not just an impact on people's education and schooling and their examinations. The experiences to be exposed to new ideas, to places of work has also taken an impact. So Yoza, and I'll come to you next on this, but you know, there's probably a cohort of a couple of years or 3 years of damage to individuals. Are we going to see this in a few years' time, that there is a problem with a group of people who have been really disadvantaged? And what are the wider impacts in the places of work and recruitment, do you think, from that? And what can we do about it?
To be honest, I feel that there has been a reverse to the progress that we achieved in that area, and there's a lot to catch up. Within the couple of years, just not right. COVID had a huge impact on that, not just on, women or diverse pool of candidates, but we're talking on and diversity in general, racial, age, a lot of things. And there's a lot to pick up on that. What we can do, I think there's a lot of things that both from personal but also from corporate perspective that we can do. And I think from a corporate perspective and on the long term, we need to set measurable metrics. There's no metrics from a corporate perspective, and we need to set metrics, targets, what we need to achieve, and where we need to go. We need to build the pipeline of pool of talent. I mean, COVID definitely affected the pool of talent of candidates applying, but we need to reach proactively to those pool of candidates. How we can do that, that's another question we need to probably, look into. Support childcare in a way or another. I mean, we're having a lot of parents and co-working parents, not just working mothers, but also I know COVID actually, was clear that it's also male and also mothers. And, one of the things is that going beyond diversity, going to inclusion. I mean, it's proactively as a parent, as a manager, as a parent, I at some point felt excluded just because I'm a parent. I couldn't attend a lot of my meetings video. I had a disabled child and, I had to juggle my duties. And I had to, think, even my manager for 1 year, she didn't know about my kid's condition. And, how I'm going to tell her that I'm no longer going to the office, how I'm going to disclose that. Is this going to affect my image my image with my peers? Is this going to affect my career progression? Is this going to affect my promotion? So going beyond diversity, but also ensuring that, we're vulnerable to inclusion, including people. That's another aspect as a corporate, as individuals, we need to think about. Leaders must lead. That might be really simple, but it comes from every person. As a leader, we need to lead diversity, not just listen to the policies. When it comes to the people that reports to me, even outside my organization, sponsorship, not just mentor those people, sponsor them. We need to take risk on the diverse pool of talent that we have to start creating diverse pool of talent of, people in executive and leadership positions. If we don't proactively do that, unconscious bias is there. I've suffered unconscious bias. I'm sure a lot of people have suffered that as a mother, as a woman, someone who comes from a different racial background, someone who lives in a country with cultural, still cultural constraints. I faced that a lot, but I think the answer was I need to lead that. Now, how to lead that is just really by sponsoring people around me in my company and also outside. We need to give them chances and, support them to ensure that they reach leadership positions. So years from now, we have that diverse pool of talent that really the one that we need to see.
And Jos, I'm going to bring in just a comment stroke question from, again, someone in the audience, a little along the themes of what you've just been talking about. It says here, issues on home working, does this not impact BAME communities more? As many live in inner cities, there's lots of pressure on minorities, and they face rural racism in the press today as well. What's your sort of response to that? And then maybe a little bit shorter, we'll have to wrap up.
That's definitely, I've seen it firsthand, but it comes to the corporate responsibility to encourage, those kind of pool of candidates to help them. I'm not saying it's diversity, it's not equality, it's equity. We need to enhance the opportunities of that pool of candidates, their chances within the company. If it means we have to give them more at some point and to ensure there's equity between those, candidates and associates and people who are applying, but also retaining them. I think a lot of the companies are talking about recruiting diverse pool of talent. Unfortunately, there's few who talk about retaining that pool of talent. How can we retain them? How we can keep them? How we can encourage them, motivate them? What policies do we need to have to keep that kind of talent? I think there's few people who are talking about that, but that's as important as also, recruiting them. Mothers, BAME communities, that's important. And yeah.
Jos, thank you very much for that. And we're now got a minute, so I'm going to have to draw it to a close. And Alicia, you got away with it there because I had some further questions on innovation and driving strategies, but you've been saved by the virtual bell.
I'm really pleased to answer them as well, David. I was really there.
Well, we can carry on afterwards if you like, Alicia. But I just want to mention, this comes in from Francis, a very important point. Thank you, Francis, that for Deltas, we are starting to deliver virtual sessions in the schools from the 22nd of March with STEM groups. Pinsent Masons will be the first launching this. Bruna from Linklaters with our, is it LA Swap or LAS Swap consortium? I don't know if I've got that right or the jingo of that right. But social media is a big part of what we're doing, and there's some progress to be made there. My question to you, Alicia, was going to be on, we have to adapt. We have to see what we can do with new tech to actually address these problems, there are some technology solutions. We didn't have quite time to get into that today, but that's because our viewers have been asking wonderful questions and comments. We thank you for it. It just leaves me now to thank the wonderful panel, Yoza, Shilpa, Alicia, Mabel. Thank you very much for all your contributions today. Thanks to attending this Legal Tech Talk. Thanks to NetLaw Media for organizing them. Please don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already to these events and join many future panels ahead. I certainly look forward to continue to play a part in those. Thank you very much, everybody. We hope you took something from this. I think the challenge is that some things may have gone backwards. There are still great opportunities, but we need to apply ourselves even more than perhaps we were before. And that is something that requires leadership, to quote what Yoza was saying. So thank you, everybody, and I hope we've given you something to think on and address. Thank you.